Introducing the Tonalities. One of the basic tenets of music learning theory is that we learn by contrast. We don't simply learn what something is, we learn what it is not. In life, we would never know what it means to be a decent moral person if we didn't have the presence of evil, immoral persons in comparison. We would never understand the concept of bravery fully unless we understood cowardice. Black, white, red, blue, tall, short. We learn by contrast. When we're learning music, then, the same must hold true. In order to fully understand what major is, we must have something to compare major to. In order to fully understand what duple meter is, we must have something to compare it to. In music learning theory, we learn many tonalities and many meters, so the brain can make as many synapses as possible. As children, research shows that the more tonalities and meters that we're exposed to, the easier it is to audiate music when we become adults. As adult musicians, the more tonalities and meters we learn, the better we'll be able to orally discriminate between and amongst tonalities, and perhaps more importantly, the clearer our understanding, precision, and intonation in major and duple, the prevailing meter and tonality of our culture will be. So what is a tonality? Well, most amateur musicians play in major, as the majority of popular songs in our culture are in major. Occasionally, songs begin on a minor chord, but will quickly revert to a major chord. I'm thinking of a typical 6-4-1-5 progression, the so-called axis of awesome progression on which so many songs are based. Other songs, often from the folk genre, have a minor chord as their tonic chord. A song, for example, like Shady Grove.
Shady Grove, my little love, Shady Grove I know. Shady Grove, my little love, bound for Shady Grove.
Shady Grove has a minor tonic chord, and in communicating with other musicians, one simply might refer to it as a minor song. Musicians who continue to further their studies, perhaps in investigating methods and techniques on how to take a solo, perhaps might come across the modes: Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. And someone might explain the modes to someone like this: if you play the white notes on the piano from C to C, that's Ionian. If you play from D to D, that's Dorian. If you play from E to E, that's Phrygian. And while that is true, and it's a perfectly fine way to hear the modes, it really is missing the point. Instead of looking at the modes as scales, it is more beneficial to our musicianship to regard each of the modes as tonal centers, as tonalities. A tonality, then, to quote Dr. Edwin E. Gordon of music learning theory fame, is, quote, defined by its tonal center, which is called a resting tone, end quote. Each tonality has a resting tone, a place where the music comes to a logical conclusion. A resting tone has a musical gravitational force. Think, for example, of the Star-Spangled Banner.
And the
home of the brave. Brave is the resting tone. If we don't get our resting tone, we are unsatisfied musically. Organizing the tonalities. Music learning theory classifies and organizes the tonalities in relation to their resting tone. To achieve this, we employ a system of verbal association using tonal solfege. A movable do system with a la-based minor is the most efficient system to organize the tonalities. This system is a useful one because the half-step relationship between mi and fa and and T and Do always remains consistent among the tonalities, with the single exception of harmonic minor. So then, if you are audiating Do as the resting tone, you are in the tonality of major, referred to music theorists as the Ionian mode. If you're audiating Re as the resting tone, you're in the tonality of Dorian, and so on. Do is movable. In addition, it should be pointed out that Do is movable. That is, we can use any letter name as Do. We can have a C Do, a B flat Do, a G Do, and so on. This allows us to superimpose our tonality system in any key. No matter where we put Do, the same relationship of half steps to whole steps remains constant. The tonalities as tonal centers. If then we begin to think about each of the tonalities as tonal centers, rather than as some obscure scale we only use in jazz improvisation, we'll realize that there are characteristic chords, harmonic functions that accompany each tonality. These chords ground us in each tonality. In major, for example, our primary chords are 1, 4, and 5. All major chords. Many songs, particularly in folk, rock, blues, and country, use only the 1, 4, and 5 chords in varying order. These chords are the DNA of most songs we hear on the radio. In our next lesson, we'll look at each of the tonalities and briefly discuss its resting tone, characteristic tones, that is, which tones define each tonality, and the primary chords found in each tonality. Stick around.